Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's not a good job to talk about low-cost private schools because it's quite controversial. A lot of people love it. A lot of people are a bit critical about it. So it's going to be a difficult one. So I decided a very easy way, which is to share my story, a personal story. In that way, nobody will criticize me. Then I'll end the conversation arguing that low-cost private schools chain can actually do to education what retail businesses like Walmart and Sainsbury's did to retailing. I believe very strongly that low-cost private schools have huge potential, very huge potential, but because it's caught up in this crossfire of ideologies, it has not been able to realize that huge potential. But it is a good model, I believe, to bring quality education to many young people. But first, let me tell you a little bit about how I got into this whole sector, how I stumbled into this whole sector. I come from a very poor family. We were about 9. We were all crammed into a little room growing up. So it was very, very difficult. I remember when I was 10 years old, I composed my first song. It was a rap song that I sang for when the mayor of Accra raised down our slum community. So we had no place to sleep. We had to sleep in churches. I remember we would sit under street lights to do our homework and then waiting for the church service to close so that we can sleep on the church benches. And it's the reason why I hate long church services, because we'll be waiting and waiting, and African church services, it can take ages, it never ends. We were so poor, I guess, that even poor people in the community were calling us poor. So when I finally graduated from school, I thought I should do something to help the less privileged. I should invest my energy into improving the lives of other poor people. So I started working for NGOs. I worked for a couple of them for about 5 years, but I got a bit disillusioned. I wasn't so happy because I decided challenging some of the models that these NGOs were using, issues about sustainability. And then I was not so happy with the waste within the system. I could imagine when $1 is approved in, say, Washington, D.C., before it gets to build a school in my village in Ghana, the many steps, the waste within the development aid supply chain, it was just too much. I began to question that. So I quit my job to go to business school because I was determined to kind of look for other models, a private sector approach probably, to educating the poor. And that's how come I landed in this whole sector. I want to share a story. In 2007, I was still in business school. I had gone to see my grandparents in my village, and I saw this little girl. She was about 6, but I think stunted growth. She looks quite younger than her age 6. But I saw her writing on this piece of wood. That was quite inspiring for me. I was wondering, it's one of the reasons why I believe that it is in our nature as human beings to learn. Nobody teaches a child to learn. And this child was writing on a piece of wood. I was curious. And it was mid-morning during school hours. I was wondering why this child was not in school. So I went into the house wanting to confront the mother or the parents who have decided not to send this child to school, even though the child shows a lot of promise, so desirous to learn. I went there, and the response from the mother was quite revealing. Probably is the reason why I am here today. She said, the only school in the village, the teachers don't show up, and when they do, they will come very late. And even when they come late, they will leave very, very early. And they will leave the children, the young children, like Amma, in the hands of bigger bullies. And so the child had to stay at home. Just when I thought that her story was quite hopeless, she snapped. Oh, I have a plan. I am saving up some money to send her to the nearby low-cost private school where at least the teachers are punctual and more caring. Note the word punctual and more caring. Some of the times, the things that we think should be the main ingredients for a good education may not necessarily be. But to Ama's parents, more punctual and caring. Let me share some lessons that I have gleaned over the period, working with, talking with poor people, and being a poor person myself. I think that one key thing is that the poor, they agree with us. They see education as the first bridge out of poverty. They think that their life depends on education. But they also believe that education or schooling, there's an opportunity cost for going to school. And so any time that you realize that children are not going to school, it's not necessarily the fact that parents are not aware they should send their children to school, but probably there's something going on. Either the quality is too bad, so worse that they decide to stay out of school, or maybe it's totally irrelevant kind of education that is being provided. I have seen programs that are trying to incentivize parents to send their children to school. I think the best incentive to let more people enroll in school is probably to improve the quality and the relevance of the education that these children receive. Yes, it is the responsibility of governments to provide education or to make sure that every child actually gets a good education. But it's not necessarily the responsibility of government to run all schools. They can run some schools, but do they have to run all schools? Choice, I believe, is very, very important. So important to every child and every parent to be able to have the choice of choosing which school they want their children to attend. And when that choice is taken away from parents, it's as if that you have turned them into robots. The poor are realists. The poor are very practical people. They are not waiting for government schools to improve. They are not waiting for things to get better. I think most of us in development circles will be advocating, advising the poor. Just wait a minute. We are talking with your government. We are talking with your local communities. The public schools will get better soon. But the poor, they are not taking chances. They are not waiting for things to get better. They have taken their destinies into their own hands, and they are enrolling their children in low-cost private schools. These schools have sprung up everywhere, and they are meeting the needs of the poor. Should we close them down? Should we just keep quiet about it? Should we just demonize them such that they don't improve? I know, yes, they have problems. Sure, they do have problems, but those problems can be addressed, and they can be addressed very, very quickly. So we decided to start a chain of schools called Omega Schools. We developed a pay-as-you-learn model. Our pay-as-you-learn model is essentially children pay on a daily basis. So every day they are coming with a coin, with a cedi, and that's about 60 US cents a day. That includes tuition, it includes food, it includes uniforms and books, everything that a child needs in order to go to school. And they pay on a daily basis. The reason why we decided to create this daily system is that, first and foremost, it holds us accountable. So I checked, and I think about 19,700 or so came to school today. Today in Ghana, in our schools. We have something we are able to check. We track attendance on a daily basis. And what it just tells me is that 19,700 people have given us a vote of confidence. They are telling us that they are just telling us that yesterday you did a good job, so we are bringing our children once again. That's why we decided that you pay as you come. Immediately we begin to see that attendance is dropping. It's a very clear signal that we are doing a very bad job and we have to sit up. We have also created for every subject, every lesson, we've created lesson plans and accompanying workbooks that allows our teachers, ordinary high school graduates that we give good training to, they're able to effectively teach the curriculum. We have also created an assessment system that tracks progress of every child. We do a midterm test and then end of term test. We are able to then find out problem areas, address it with their teachers, and they go back to also pass it on to their students. And then what we found to be very useful is that if you put a couple of teachers in a room and you just give them training, it doesn't work. But what actually works is the ongoing mentoring and support that the teachers get. We visit them on a weekly basis, provide them all the support they need to be effective in their classrooms. And I'm happy to announce that we opened our first school in 2009, September 2009. And as we speak, we have 40 schools with 20,000 students, all learning at a higher level than what exists in their communities. And over the years, these lessons gives me some confidence. And the confidence is that I believe strongly that low-cost private schools are actually good for the poor. Low-cost private schools are good for education. And low-cost private schools are, in fact, good business as well. And that if we allow bigger chains to come into the market, they can do to education what Walmart and Sainsbury's actually did to retail business. You all agree with me that competition is good. Competition is good for the parents. It's good for the children. When you have only public school, one public school in a local community, the chances that quality will drop is very high. It is the same way if you have only one private school in a community, the chances that the quality will drop is high. So we believe that if every child is going to get a good education, if every child is going to be educated, then there's a need for us to have this whole spectrum of schools, whether it's public, whether it's private, whether it's NGO run, and all together can address various needs. Low-cost private schools, if we develop them further into chains like Omega schools, like Bridge International Academies is doing, can drive down costs so significantly so that parents will be the ultimate beneficiaries. One thing we've realized is that when parents pay for education, they demand more. And that's an undeniable fact. You can talk about advocacy in the public sector, you can do all, you can shout it, you can talk about it in parliament and all that. The point is that there's a proverb in my language, it says that where your blood is, that is where your voice is. Where your money is, that's where your voice is. If you pay for education, you're going to demand for more. You would think that Omega schools with only 60 cents, providing food, tuition, clothing, everything together, our parents would treat us with a kid's glove. No, you should come to our parents' meeting. One of the very interesting part of our model is our parents' meeting. When the parents come to this meeting, they are very aggressive, very demanding, very, very, very harsh on us. It's because they pay for it. And they demand accountability on a daily basis. And that helps us to stay on our toes. Big education brands, when they come in, will solve information asymmetry. I know there's an argument that, oh, these poor parents are ignorant people. They don't know what they are doing. They just send their children to school. That's far from the truth. Poor people are not ignorant at all. These poor parents, they can sense good quality education kilometers away. They have their own traditional ways of determining whether you are providing a good education or not. And those measures are good. Of course, you can argue that they are not good enough. But when these big brands come in, we've been told that the poor, they are brand conscious. When these big brands emerge in education, we can be sure that they can solve this issue of how do they know whether this education they are receiving is good quality or not. I believe very strongly that low-cost private schools would help improve the quality of education as well. The least the poor needs is more of the West. You see, when you go to a public school, it's quite depressing. Depressing is the word. Because you see that these children are left abandoned. They are there, very, very eager to learn children, but there are no teachers to show up. And it's quite depressing. And for the developing world, it would have been more depressing if not for the emergence of low-cost private schools. Because when you feel that the public school teacher is careless, doesn't care about the coming to school or not, and you have no alternative, and that can be quite depressing. But for low-cost private schools, we will have many, many more parents withdrawing their children from school and using them for child labor. I believe that low-cost private school chains, the more they emerge, they are going to invest in research and development in the curriculum and improve the quality of teaching and learning in these schools. The fact is that there is a limit to the quality, the level of quality that a single standalone school can provide. Because if you have 500 students, the only way sometimes you can improve the quality is probably for you to increase your fees. But if chains emerge and they have a number of schools, for instance, we have 20,000 students, and we are able to provide education at a much lower cost than a single school can do. And finally, I want to also say that low-cost private schools chain is actually good business. It is sustainable. It's not dependent on always getting donations. It is attracting a whole new capital from impact investors. It's attracting people who they are tired of dropping money into something like a black hole. You put money in it and you don't see any results coming. If you put up a school, sometimes the payback period can be as short as 5 years. You pay back the cost of putting up the school. It's not just doing good, it is doing well as well. There's a good return on investment. It's a sector that is so exciting and is attracting new talents into the space. People who were previously disillusioned, they were sick and tired of the public school sector, can now find expression in such organizations. Can you imagine that for a very, very long time, education in some of these emerging markets in developing countries like Ghana, for instance, has always been seen like a public good, a public sector, and the only way, if you wanted to be an educator, is to work in the public sector. And with the bureaucracy and all the problems within the public sector, many young people don't find it exciting. But with the emergence of these private sector approach to education, it's attracting and retaining talent. It is also bringing on board new entrepreneurs. People are now creatively finding ways to bring quality education to people. And also, previously, I think the environment for low-cost private school is getting better. Previously, it was met with aggression, close them down, this is unacceptable and all that. But now it's giving way. People are beginning to be more accommodating. The government is beginning to be more accommodating to these low-cost private schools. And that's a good opportunity for people, more investors to come into this space. Finally, I want to also say that with growing population, it is allowing even poor schools to survive because the demand is so great. And so even poor schools are surviving because the numbers are just too overwhelming. But I believe that when these changes emerge, then the bad schools will begin to lose students, they will drop off, and the good ones would do well in the sector. So to recap, we believe that private schools, and for that matter, chains of schools, when they emerge, it will be good for the poor, it's good business, and it's good for education.